So what if I told you that one of the biggest revolutions in Western history was quietly sparked by a short, anonymous book from the Middle Ages? Today, we're going to unlock a really mysterious text that one of history's most important figures said was second only to the Bible. Let's find out who we're talking about, and why this little book was such a huge deal.
And yeah, that figure was Martin Luther. This is what he wrote back in 1518 about the very book we're diving into today. I mean, coming from the guy who was about to completely split the church, that is some of the highest praise you could possibly imagine. So, what on earth was in this book that just completely captured his mind?
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First up, we'll look at why Luther was such a big fan of this book. Then we'll get into what makes it a so-called pearl of mysticism. After that, we'll dig into its radical core message, this idea of the prison of the self. Then we'll figure out who this book was even for, and we'll wrap it all up with its beautiful conclusion, this idea of the great dance of love.
Okay, so let's start with that connection, because it's kind of surprising, right? Why was the leader of the Protestant Reformation so obsessed with this anonymous manuscript that was already 200 years old?
Well, the reason was just how radically direct it was. See, in Luther's time, theology was this exclusive club for academics, debated in Latin, hidden away behind university walls. But this book, which Luther himself named Theologia Deutsch, or German theology, was written in the language of regular people. It just bypassed all the gatekeepers and spoke directly to your soul. And that idea was totally revolutionary. It really became a cornerstone of the Reformation itself.
So it wasn't just that it was written in German. It was a completely different way of thinking about faith. The source material we're looking at calls it Christ mysticism, which is less about rules and doctrines and way more about having a direct, personal connection with God.
And this slide just lays out that contrast perfectly. On one side, you've got the university guys focused on scholarly knowledge about God. But on the other side, you have the Theologia Germanica, which is all about the direct, personal experience of God. It wasn't about what you could argue in a debate. It was about what you could actually live. You know, Luther himself had this really powerful metaphor for the book. He called it a pearl. To him, it was this rare, beautiful, precious thing. In this huge ocean of complicated academic debates, this one little book was a single source of pure, simple truth.
And that brings us to the core idea of the book. I gotta warn you, it's a challenging one. The author basically argues that our biggest problem as humans is what they call the prison of the self.
So, to really get what this prison is all about, the book asks this super fundamental question. It's not, hey, what actions are sins? It's much deeper. It's, what is the very nature of sin itself?
And here's its really stark answer. According to this book, sin isn't just, breaking a rule. Sin, at its absolute root, is any time you assert your own will against God's will. It's the simple act of wanting something for yourself by yourself.
The author even uses 3 specific German terms to really paint a picture of this prison. First, there's Ichheit, that's I-ness, the constant focus on I. Then you've got Meinheit, minus, that possessive need for things to be mine. And when you put those two together, you get Selbstigkeit, a state of being completely captive to your own self. The source calls it an abyss-deep prison. Wow.
So here's the crucial point, the real takeaway. The only way out of this prison is to give up the self. Entirely. Real spiritual freedom doesn't come from making yourself better, but from completely surrendering that I, me, and mine until there's nothing left but God's will.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, who on earth is this for? I mean, that sounds like an incredibly demanding path. Well, funny enough, the book actually answers that very question by laying out 4 different kinds of readers. So first you have the compelled. These are folks who are good just out of fear or because they feel they have to be. Second, the mercenaries. They do good things because they're hoping for a reward in heaven. Third are the free spirits who think they're so enlightened that they're above any rules or guidance. And the author says, look, this book isn't for any of them. It's for that 4th group, the contemplatives.
Basically, this book is a manual for someone who's already pretty deep into their spiritual journey. It's written for the person who isn't motivated by fear or reward anymore, but by a real, burning desire to truly understand and unite with the divine.
Okay, so what happens if you actually succeed on this incredibly difficult path? What's the reward, if you can even call it that, for losing everything you call I? Well, this brings us to the beautiful, really poetic final section of the book. The book uses this amazing metaphor to describe the final goal.
the great round dance of love. It's this vision of cosmic, joyful celebration where your individual soul gets to join in a divine dance. And this part is so key. Surrendering yourself doesn't lead to some empty void. It's not about becoming nothing. It's actually about making space to be filled with something infinitely bigger. This divine, all-encompassing love that just erases the line between your soul and its creator.
The text really struggles to describe this state, which is almost impossible to put into words, with lines like this: all in one as one, and one in all as all. It's this mystical vision where all the separation we feel just dissolves. There's no more I and God, there's just a perfect, loving unity.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty challenging thought. I mean, we live in a world that is all about building your personal brand, asserting your identity, and celebrating the self. So, in a world like ours, what would it actually mean to let go of the I, me, and mine, and to join that great dance of love?